What is up, everybody? Rajay back in the house on a Tuesday night with another live stream. This is going to be another fun one to check out because for the first time ever, we're going to be talking with a malt producer, which I'm going to be bringing more of these type of things to the channel because I want to get more into talking about not just the finished product of the beer, but everything that kind of builds up to the beer. So I'm very happy to actually bring in Ian Goering, who's the director of operations for Blue Ox Malthouse. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and roll right into it. And Ian, welcome to the stage, my friend.
Hey, Rod, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Great to have you here. And, you know, these are the kind of things I want to do. I want to be able to share more of the beer evangelist type stories out there and kind of get people more entrenched, so to speak. And this is a good opportunity. And we got to give a shout out to Em from Radcraft for getting us together as well. So shout out to her as well and all the great work that Emily is doing there also. But Blue Ox Malthouse, what do we need to know about Blue Ox Malthouse? Let's get into a little bit like what makes you guys kind of stand out? How did you get started up there in Lisbon Falls, Maine? Some of the backstory to what we can share with the audience.
Yeah. So we are the largest floor malt house facility outside of Europe. We just finished a massive expansion about a year and a half ago, which brought our total capacity up over about 5 million pounds. So that makes us the largest floor maltster really in the Western Hemisphere. So we are 100% floor malt at our facility, and we've got the full catalog of base malts and specialty malts with the new roaster that we brought online recently too. We're about 13 years old, and we were started by a guy named Joel Alex, who graduated, I don't remember the exact title of his degree, but it was something along the lines of sustainable economic agriculture systems. And he wanted to figure out how to make rural agricultural communities in Maine more economically sustainable. And so the major crop that's grown in Maine is potatoes. And in support of potatoes, they grow barley as a rotation crop to support that. Now, a lot of farmers were just turning that barley back into the field to help with the crop rotation, or they were selling it into feed for, pennies, really pennies, the low price on that. So Joel said, hey, we've got this emerging craft beer market. If you guys can meet certain standards with your barley, we can malt it and sell it to the brewers and, really start to gain value for this rotation crop that they have and take advantage of the beer scene. So that was about 13 years ago. Fast forward to today. We are well represented throughout all of New England. We make it down with customers all down the East Coast, and we're here doing it. We're having fun.
Awesome. I did not know Maine was known for the potatoes. I didn't know. I just think whenever I think potatoes, I think Idaho. But to know that was actually their largest crop, and then you guys were able to build success off the secondary market of them actually doing the potatoes is actually pretty cool in itself as well. The floor malt. So I was going to pull up the website here as well, so I can share that with the folks. So here we have the picture, like the floor. So what is the concept or the process behind the floor malt? Because I found it very interesting looking at the website and going through some of the details. I don't think people kind of know maybe as much about what that actually is. They kind of just see, like, thinking the malts or grains are up in some silos somewhere and everything like that. So how's this like help the process for what you guys do and the art behind it?
Yeah. So for argument's sake, a brewer can't just take grain from the field and make beer out of it. They need to do this value-added process called malting to the grain. Now, malt can be done to any cereal crop that's out there. When we're talking about beer, we're usually talking about barley, but wheat, rye, oats, or other things that are commonly going to be malted. So the process of malting is starting to germinate that cereal grain kernel so that the little baby plant starts to grow. And in that beginning stages of that kernel starting to grow, it generates all sorts of enzymes and it starts to convert starches into sugars. So we want to pause that at that point in time where there's all those enzymes and sugars in that kernel before it really starts to turn into a plant. And we stop that by drying it out in a kiln. Once that is done, that product is called malt, and brewers or distillers are able to take that, and through the brewing and distilling process, they're able to extract those sugars to feed the yeasts and go through the fermentation brewing process. So
very nice.
that's kind of the crash course on what malt is. Now, to make malt, there's really 3 steps. There's going to be the steeping step, the germination step, and the kilning step. So we all remember back to elementary school when we did the science experiment where we put the lima beans with the wet paper towel in the Ziploc bags and put it up on the window to learn how germination works. We're going to reference that a bunch today. That's really what we're doing on a large scale. So that first step of steeping, we're going to take all of that barley, and we're going to just argue, for argument's sake, we're going to say barley for this process. We're going to take that barley into these giant tanks, and we're going to steep them. We're going to flood it, drain it, flood it, drain it. And we're trying to get those kernels to get to a certain moisture level that's going to trigger the germination process. Once that germination starts and that little teeny nubbin of a rootlet starts to come out of the kernel, we call that stage chitted. And all the old man dad jokes in the industry are about the good chit. We've got the good chit. Our malt is the good chit. It's funny every single time. So once that kernel gets to that chitted point and it's at the moisture level we like, it's time to move on to the next step of germination. And this is where floor malting really starts to differentiate from what we would call pneumatic malting, which is what the majority of malt houses are doing out there in the world. So what needs to happen during that germination phase is that we need to regulate it for temperature, for moisture level, and we really need to keep the roots from binding up together. As those rootlets grow, we've all, waited too long to repot one of those house plants and it's all root bound. That happens really quick in this germination process. And we want to keep that from happening because it just causes problems downstream. So the grain needs to be agitated constantly through the germination process to help regulate for moisture, temperature, and this root binding. Now, in modern, what we call pneumatic malt houses, they often use what's called Saladin boxes, or they'll have roasting drums. Those drums will just constantly be spinning around, turning that grain in there as it germinates. With the Saladin boxes, they kind of look like giant stainless steel food grade dumpsters. And they've got a track system across the top with augers that just kind of go back and forth, agitating that grain. Now, with floor malting, we're actually going to take all of that grain and we're going to spread it in little piles around the floor, and we're going to spread it like mulch. So it's about 5-6 inches thick all across these concrete floors that we've got. Then every couple of hours, we need to have somebody from our staff go in and do a turn. And that's actually what we're seeing right here on the website is one of our guys turning the malt over. So traditionally, you've got what's called a rake, which is really underselling it. The thing weighs like 30 pounds, and it's plowing and kind of separating and turning that malt. So every few hours, somebody needs to go in there and walk back and forth, dragging that rake around to turn the malt over. So why would we do it this way?
That's what I'm wondering. Okay.
It's a fair question. The first time I met the distiller down at Treehouse, he goes, "So you guys are 100% floor malt?" And I go, "Yeah, we are." And he goes, "So you're masochists."
Well, the guy pulling the rake is definitely getting a workout. I say that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. These guys are all super buff and they get their podcasts in for sure.
Yeah.
So the arguments for floor malt is that it's going to be a gentler hand throughout that process. It's going to be more nuanced. We're really able to respond to the malt. These guys are taking samples as they're raking it out and monitoring, where those moisture levels are at, where the temperature is at, and they can respond on the fly to a specific area or floor. If the grain is behaving quicker or slower than typical, they can really kind of turn on a dime to handle that. So floor malted products are considered premium products. They're generally going to be more nuanced and complex in their flavors. They're going to be more consistent from batch to batch, and just going to be a higher quality malt in general. The only real argument against it is it's super labor intensive.
Okay.
Now, with the pneumatic malting, it makes really good malt as well, not as necessarily consistent or nuanced as floor malt's going to be because it's not as gentle. But the pro for there is you can have one person make a whole lot of malt in one run. So on our big floors, we can do about 10 to 12 tons at a time. Some of the really big malt houses will do 100, maybe even 250 tons in a run. So we're just a drop in the bucket compared to the really big guys, but we're making a more premium product in the end. So the third step is going to be germination, or is going to be kilning. And that's going to be the same whether you're pneumatic malting or you're floor malting. All of the grain's going to get loaded into a kiln that's going to go through a different heating regimen. And depending on what those temperatures are and how long we go, we can get everything from a Pilsner. And with our kilns, we can get up to about a caramel 60 is about as dark as we can go with about as dark as we will go with our kilns.
Okay.
The roaster, if we're going to use anything darker than that.
Gotcha. So would you say like the majority of the other malt houses, a lot of them are doing a pneumatic malting then rather than what you guys are doing there? So you're giving it like a little bit of that extra touch.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's pneumatic malting it is by far the most popular form of malting out there. And that is what most malt houses are doing. And that's one of the things that we really take pride in is that we are doing it the old fashioned way. I like to, I take a little bit of pride in the fact that you could pull an Encino man and have a caveman come to our facility. And I'm sure they would be scared of all of the big shiny tanks and machines we've got, but they would see that grain on the floor. And they would know, hey, those guys are about to make beer.
Yeah,
it feels good. It feels connected to the tradition of beer and malting.
Yeah. And speaking of beer, so you're pouring a beer that I'm going to pour a beer here as well. So what beer are you pouring now? Is it one of the beers you actually work with at all? Or is it just something you kind of just have in the beer fridge?
Yeah, so I am drinking a Tributary. This is a New Zealand Pilsner. I'm going to try to say that name. What? I'm not going to try to say that name. It's a New Zealand Pilsner. And this was a Blue Ox Northwoods collaboration with so Tributary Blue Ox Northwoods. I used to be one of the brewers at Tributary, and I also worked at Northwoods. So this was a fun one for me with a bunch of my coworkers all getting together to drink to brew this beer. And it's great. It's 100% Blue Ox on the malt bill, and there's a whole smattering of New Zealand hops in here.
Oh, nice. Okay. So how many like breweries do you guys work with there? Like, obviously, it's got to be a good amount of handful. Is it mainly like more East Coast breweries, or do you guys go across the country? Like,
yeah, we so in Maine, just about every Maine brewery you can think of uses us at some quantity. I would say reaching out into greater New England, we're pretty well represented in most of the New England states. I would say the big breweries that use us that people could find anywhere are going to be Allagash, Maine Beer Company, Dogfish Head, Bissell Brothers, breweries like that, Spyglass.
okay.
So those are going to be the more national reaching, Baxter Brewing. And we are available nationwide. We also distribute up to Canada a little bit as well. We make it into Quebec.
Okay.
So we are here to not just be local beer for Maine, but we consider our local malt for Maine. We consider ourselves local New England and local United States. If you're looking for premium floor malt that competes with the European premium malt, there's no need to import it in. We've got it right here in Maine for you guys. It's awesome.
Okay, nice. And being up there, that's one of the things, seeing where you were located at. And we kind of touched a little bit earlier before we started the show, kind of just a quick little talk about, but how has it been impactful? Because Canada was such a huge trading partner for us, and still is in some regard, I guess, depending on what industry it may be. But how have you been affected with some of the things that have been taking place? Are you still able to still do a lot with some of the places in Canada, or you feel like there's been a pullback, or how's that all affecting you?
So yeah, Canada's been a real interesting situation with us. There was a craft malt house in Canada, Malterie Colem, that unfortunately had a massive fire, I guess about 2 years ago at this point in time. So when they were rebuilding, they reached out to us and a bunch of malt houses in the Northeast United States and said, hey, do you guys mind? It's called toll malting in the malt world. We would call it contract brewing in the beer world, but they asked if we would toll malt for them so they could still supply their customers while they were rebuilding their new facility. So the way that worked, they would send us their barley and their recipes in their bags, and we would make it for them and send it back to them. And that was working well. And then all of a sudden, this big question of tariffs came up, and it was a big question because we were importing it, but selling it back to them. And that got really confusing. Fortunately, on our end, the Canadians volunteered to handle all of the paperwork at the borders. So
okay, nice.
That was really convenient. For the products that we are making for our customers, that is almost entirely sourced from Maine, with whatever isn't sourced from Maine coming from usually upstate New York. That's mostly going to be organic stuff that just isn't grown in Maine. So, you know, at the surface, it seemed like we might be tariff proof, except for all of the power and fertilizer and equipment support for our farmers comes from Canada. And all of our bags come from Southeast Asia. So we were affected. Absolutely. It was, and beyond that, our customers were also deeply affected, particularly with aluminum going into their cans and their other ingredients as well. So it was a really, and still remains a really confusing time for a lot of people, and what's going on and what are their costs going to be, you know, now versus next year. We just don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely been kind of like a wave type thing. It's up and down and up and down and up and down, or a roller coaster, I guess you could say as well. So, kind of interested there. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, you know, one of the things that I think COVID really brought out when it came to supply chain issues, when COVID was happening and you were ordering ingredients from Europe and they might not be sending ships until they were full, and so it was kind of unknown time frames. One of the things that came out that's a best practice, that's always been a best practice, is diversifying your suppliers and keeping it localized as possible. If the docks are having strikes or ships from overseas aren't making it over, our supply chain and network to get things out to our customers was solid and never affected during that. And it actually brought a lot of people to us during that time because we did have a solid supply chain to them. We are, you know, within 25 miles of most of our customers, particularly our Portland customers. So it was just really, you know, whether it be tariffs or pandemics, these localized supply chains are just a best practice.
Okay. And for those of you watching as well, please feel free to drop comments in there if you have questions here for Ian as well. Definitely want to get those covered. As far, oh, by the way, I actually cracked open the beer. Having you on as a malt, like I need to get something malty, so I just cracked open one of the Bourbon County stouts that I had laying around.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I was like, I'll go ahead and try that one there. So, like when you roll like regular operations of a malt house, like what do you kind of do? Like, what's your day to day kind of like? Is it, you know, going around and obviously making sure things are getting done, but was it like, you know, start out crack of dawn, go into the eat? Like, what's it kind of like for you as a director of operations there?
So we're a really small team at Blue Ox. So I generally spend about half my time at the malt house, and when I'm there, I'm working on scheduling. I'm meeting with the engineering team to see, you know, what's the status of the equipment. What foreseeable like maintenance needs do we have? I'm talking with the warehouse team about the inventory. I'm talking to the sales team about what our forecasts are, and just trying to make sure that the schedule, the inventory, the warehouse, the equipment's all up to speed. So that way our customers never have to be told that, hey, we don't have something in stock. You have to wait. We're anticipating their demand. Because of our size, it is really hard to get old malt from us. Most of the malt that people are getting was made within the month that they're ordering it. And so we really pride ourselves on having a consistent, fresh product. And I'm just making sure that all of the wheels are working. I'm kind of just the communication between the different departments.
Gotcha.
I've got a great team, though. Everybody does their job really well and takes a lot of pride in their work. And I really don't have to worry about any of that.
That makes life a lot easier for sure.
Oh, it does. Those guys save my ass so many times. So the other half of the time when I'm not at the malt house, I'm doing customer support and supporting our sales team on that. So I'm not so much going out seeking new customers, but I'm working with our existing customers, checking in, making sure they're happy with, what's going on, working on R&D projects with them, talking about their forecasts, and just being there to support our customers as I can. And occasionally I get to come on the podcast and drink beer and have good conversations.
Always works for me. You were talking about the difference between the floor malting and the nomadic malting. In my mind, I was thinking, this is kind of like free range versus case, for whatever reason in my mind, that's kind of what it related to me. But saying that, one of the questions is, why should brewers really care so deeply about malt selection in today's beer market? How much of an impact is that making to their product? Does that come up in any conversations? The concern that should be there? Like, people that might be, we know like some of the big boys, so to speak, like take shortcuts on some of their stuff. So malt can make that big of a difference, but are brewers like catching on to that? Like they know there's an importance of knowing what type of malt you're really selecting.
Yeah, there's just a handful of qualities that you can judge your malt by, right? You're gonna have the how does it brew? Does it perform well? Is it going to convert and actually turn into beer? And how well does it do that? Efficiency stats are going to be wrapped up into the performance. How does it smell and taste? Does it have a flavor that I want to use for this beer or not? And price. How much does this malt cost? We definitely win on the first two things. We're absolutely the best malt that you can get out there. We've got really awesome flavors, rich, complex, nuanced flavors in our full line. We are really high performing. We oftentimes have customers tell us that they have to rewrite their recipes to actually use less malt in a run because they get such good efficiency out of what they use. But because we're a premium product, we're not the cheapest option out there. So I talk to any brewer that is telling me what malts they really want to use for their dream recipe. Hey, this is the passion project I've been working on here or there. It's always the absolute best quality malts that they can get, well performing, really tasty. They're never like, oh yeah, and I want to use this malt because it's cheap.
Right.
So it's only when the brewery owners or the accountants at the brewery get involved do brewers come off of wanting to use those premium choices. So the point I'm trying to make is that malt makes a huge difference in this, and the better quality malt you use, the better quality beers you're going to get on the back end. And brewers know that. A lot of GABF medals go out to beers that our malt is in. This year, Allagash's lager got a gold medal for lager that had our gold medal winning Pilsner malt in that. And so it's, you use good ingredients, you make good beer. And it's the same for food. The better your ingredients are going to be, the better your food is going to be.
Yeah. And are you doing like the Allagash white as well? So is that like using your stuff there too? Because that's always like metal in it stuff also out there. So yeah.
Yeah, Allagash is and always has been a great partner of ours. We are in Allagash white. We're in the lager. We're in a lot of the From Maine with Loves. They kind of splatter us in all over the board. Same with Maine Beer Company.
Yeah.
Those two have been huge supporters of ours since the beginning, and they put a little bit of us in all of their beers. It's great partnerships.
Excellent. Yeah, Maine Beer Company is one I need to definitely still get into. Over the years, everybody's like, talks about great lunches and some of the other stuff they're doing. It's just like, I don't know why. I just haven't got it. I got to make a note to actually pick up one of their beers because we have one of our places here, Jungle Gyms, where they do get, I know, Maine in for that one. They're like one of the biggest places to buy beer across the country. So kind of fortunate along those lines. But like Allagash, I've had numerous times. So I'm never disappointed. So
yeah, those guys have been the rock stars in Maine for a while now. Everybody kind of looks up to them as the shining example of how to do things right.
Yeah. How important is like the regional identity and that regional land, like where you're at, as far as for your mission at Blue Ox? I know you mentioned the terroir in there as well on the website, but all of that kind of ties together where it's kind of like, on the beer side, we're seeing where now, for instance, Anchor's going to be pulling out if they do come back, but the new owner taking them out of San Francisco, which a lot of people say, well, that's terrible because that is a San Francisco brewery. So where you're at and region does come into play. So how's that like tying to what you guys are trying to do there?
Yeah. So a couple of different ways to look at this. Most of the malting quality barley that's grown in the Northeast is grown in Maine, which is not a lot, but we've got the majority of it here. So we are close to our suppliers, which is always going to be a good thing. We've got a lot of communication with the farms. We're nearby. So that's really important to us for our supply chain and sourcing. As far as Maine goes, we are super proud Mainers, every single one of us at the Malthouse. Maine is one of those places where people are really proud to be from. And the Maine image is, we're known for our food scene. We're known for our beer scene. And we like to export the Maine image as well, whether it's LL Bean or Allagash or Blue Ox or Maine Beer Company. We're all kind of exporting to the world, hey, this is kind of what Maine life is like. And that's really important and special to all of us here.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to build up. I mean, it's like, it's New Hampshire, but it's like, Ben and Jerry's. Everybody knows New Hampshire, Ben and Jerry's. Like, you got to be able to pull in and it's like, it just brings that area out even more through the products you're actually doing. And thank you, Jeff. Nice comment. Appreciate that. So love the perspective, pulling back the curtain on how beer is made. Such detail and expertise and super interesting. Well, we appreciate that. Thank you, sir. That's what we try to do here. But one of the things I want to get into with Jeff actually saying that as well, because not only do you deal with the breweries from micro, nano, all the way on up, but you also do stuff with home brewers, right, too. So home brewers are able to find opportunities. Like if for a home brewer, because we do have some home brewers that actually watch the channel here as well. And like, what would you point out, like a few tips for them as far as when they go to like get malt when they're doing their home brew? Like, what do they want to learn? What do they want to look for when they're going to a home brew shop? And you guys have home brewing stuff on your site too. So you can also check out Blue Ox. There's a link at the top of the comments to check out what they're doing there if you are a home brewer.
Yeah. So we just started doing small format packaging for home brewers. We're selling 5-pound bags. You can buy them right from our website. And we've had a lot of home brewers reaching out. And unfortunately, in the past couple of years, a lot of homebrew shops have closed down, both in Maine. I know some have closed down in Vermont. And we have different homebrewers and homebrew clubs reaching out to us saying like, hey, what do we do? Homebrewers are in a really unique position that a lot of commercial breweries aren't in, that they can use really whatever ingredients they want. And they don't have that person saying, hey, you need to make this as cheap as you can. You need to really, pay attention to your cost of goods. They don't even need to make a repeatable beer if they don't want to. So they can really get creative and wild with this. So along with that, home brewers are really proud of where they're from and what they're doing, and chance to use local ingredients is also interesting to them. Many times these people are growing their own hops. They are active in their local clubs, and they just really want to make something that is unique to them, a unique beer that tells their story. So we kept getting all these homebrewers reaching out to us asking if they could come by and buy malt. And at the time, we were just selling to brewers, commercial breweries. So the smallest format we had was 50 pounds, which can be a massive amount for a home brewer.
Yeah.
So we said, all right, let's start breaking these down into smaller quantities and start servicing that community as well. And we've had a lot of homebrew customers that then go on to start professional breweries. I'm thinking of Naiad Country Brewery up in Orland, Maine. He came through as a home brewer, started brewing with some of our stuff, and he's killing it up there. If you go up to Acadia, you have to stop through there on your way up.
Do you ever do like anything like I said, like workshop where they can like home brewers can come out and learn there at Blue Ox on different techniques and different stuff? Like, you ever have like people come out and kind of do that where you can kind of help them get off on their way a little bit and kind of get them on a good path for brewing?
So not yet.
Okay.
We just a couple of months ago teamed up with the Maine Brewers Guild, and we ran a malt boot camp. There's another craft malt house in Maine, Maine Malt House, and those guys came down. We hosted them, and we ran. It was free to anybody in the Maine Brewers Guild, which is the professional guild in the state. And we just kind of ran through, how do you read a spec sheet for malt? How does the malting process work? Why would you select these malts over those malts? What's the difference between a caramel or a crystal? And just kind of ran them through an all day long boot camp. And it had a lot of interest and went really well. So we thought to ourselves, hey, maybe we can offer something like this to homebrewers in the future and have some kind of a workshop. We've also talked to some of the homebrew clubs, particularly in Vermont, about coming out and doing that kind of workshop in one of their spaces, maybe partnering with a customer of ours that's a local brewery to them and, running a similar type of workshop. So it's something that we're hoping to do more of in the future.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be an excellent opportunity to have something like that for sure. And you mentioned like about the home brew, like we had Cincinnati, we had Listerman Brew, and they closed at the end of the year, which was sad to see. They started out as a homebrew shop, became really popular as a brewery. People kind of forgot they were a homebrew shop, I think, and we're kind of going for the brewery type thing. They ended up falling out, and it was kind of like, okay, it's just time to close the door here. And it was sad because they were like the home brewing shop in Cincinnati. But you go down these different paths and it takes you different ways. And unfortunately, people I've seen over the last few months keep asking again, it's a bubble about to burst, bubble about to burst. I'm like, I don't think it's a bubble about to burst. I think it's just the business cycle going through contraction as it needs to go through because of all the different breweries out there. So from your perspective and the clients you're dealing with, is there concerns you're seeing out there about anything taking place? Or are you just kind of seeing this is also part of like the turning of the business model? Because we have 9,700 plus breweries across the country still, so it's not like we're hurting,
Yeah. So the industry is down, and everybody is feeling it across the board. Suppliers, breweries, the industry is down, and everyone's feeling it. It's a predictable pattern. The beer industry has repeated itself for the third time in a row on a 15-year cycle here in the United States. So it's been a somewhat predictable arch of the ups and downs. It's, at a low point now. I don't think it's going to get too much lower than it is. And I think it will start to creep back up. And we'll probably repeat ourselves for a fourth time if history is true. So we are hopeful that it will get there. What I am still seeing, though, is a focusing in on best practices, which is why the best practices are there. Best practices aren't there for the good times. They're there for the hard times. And you're really seeing which breweries have best practices and which ones are learning quickly what the best practices are. And these are going to be things like narrowing in on flagship beers, keeping your supply chain diverse and local, staying true to your identity and, having an identity and staying true to it.
Right.
Just to name a few of them. When I look at all of the customers we'd talked about before, Tributary, Maine Beer Co., these are places that have an identity and they stay to it, they focus in and they look at these best practices, and it's what's getting people through. So I see that's what's happening right now, and we're seeing less silliness out there as far as Instagrammable wow factor. Can you believe we put this in this beer? Or we went this extreme on it, and we're just getting back into best practices. And part of that too is low ABV beers as well. Every culture kind of always narrows in on lower ABV beers. We're seeing non-alcoholics have a huge rise in this country right now as kind of a reaction to that. And across the board, I'm seeing ABVs drop down with a lot of our customers. I love it. I generally drink by what the lowest ABV is on the menu. I like to drink a lot, but I don't necessarily like to get drunk. So that's where I'm at.
Well played. Well played. Yeah, it's funny. I was reading an article the other day, and I think we may mention on we do a Midwest beer show every other Saturday. So we talked about this Saturday night, and it was about the reemergence. Well, I say the reemergence. They were talking about these new mid-level beers coming out. I'm like, that's not new. That's just a reemergence of the table beer. Like, nobody knows about the table beer style, it seems. But the table beer style was always like the 2.5% to 3.5% type area. It's just, it was more popular over like in the UK and over in Europe than we've ever had really here. But it's just like here, people going back to lagers. Now you're seeing this other style coming. I mean, so it's like the old always becomes the new at some point. So it's not.
And the low ABV just makes so much sense, and that's why every culture kind of comes to it. I'm thinking back to I think it was the first CBC in Nashville. I went to a talk that was making session beers, and Will Myers from Cambridge Brewing kind of did the opening bit, and he was like, they're cheaper to make. You sell them for the same price. People are more likely to drink more of them. What else can I tell you? Like, talk's over.
Yeah, I mean, from a financial perspective, that'll definitely make the bean counters happy, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And it makes the servers happy too, because you don't have some guy that just drank 3 10%ers sitting there in front of you. So
yeah. I said, would it be worse, like the 3%, 10%er guy, or a couple 4 or 5-year-olds running around? I don't know what that goes into, but occasionally we talk about the kids in the brewery on this channel at times, and it's like, I don't know which one would be worse, but yeah. It's a tricky situation with the kids at the breweries. Sometimes dogs at the breweries too. Sometimes the dogs and stuff too. But I gotta say, with some breweries, there's also a way to position yourself to be accepting of that, right? Like, so one of the breweries here, we were talking about this the other night, Mad Tree up, they have 2 spots, and the one they just created, they actually put an outdoor area just for the kids to run around. So instead of the kids coming over to the adult stuff and throwing all the cornhole bags on the roof or throwing rocks at the building, like, here's your own little area, and the kids can just go run around and do whatever they want to do over there, and then everybody can be over here. But I always say it always comes back to the parent, because the parent is the one that has to make sure they know what their kid is doing, which is always kind of curious sometimes when you see both parents drinking. Like, wait a minute, who's the one taking charge here? Because it's not going to be the server. They just should have to take care of them. It's kind of like, and then that's when stuff can happen when they're not being watched.
I'm in full agreement with you there.
But from a perspective, as we do drink a good amount of beer, and for myself, kind of being aware of it, but what would you say, like, how does malt influence flavor, mouthfeel, stability in beer more than people probably realize?
So it is everything that you just said. The fact, it's a joke, but it's also a fact, is that you can make beer without hops. You can't make beer without malt. So
true.
It is probably the most important ingredient next to the yeast, which is doing all of the work there on the fermentation level. But the malt is where you're going to get the color of your beer. It's where you're going to dial in the body of your beer. It's where you're going to get the majority of the flavor of your beer. Now, even if you've got a hop forward beer where the hops really stand out, drink a hop water and drink a beer, and you'll see how much that malt is coming in and supporting those flavors. And even on those hoppy beers, how much of the malt is what you're actually experiencing when you drink that beer. I'm obviously really biased towards the malt side of things, but I spent most of my career as a brewer, not as a maltster. And
Okay.
I always had the philosophy of, with very few exceptions, any problem or request that you come to me with, I'm going to go to my mash first and foremost to start to address those changes. And that is where the grain comes to shine. It's where it does its thing. And
Okay.
I am in full supporter of that. The mash is the most important aspect of the process for really creating the beer that you want to make.
Right.
So the malt is everything.
Yeah. Well, it's still surprising drinking with some people or being out places and they go to order a beer. They're like, oh, I don't want a dark beer. Dark beer is too strong for me. And it's like, the darkness or lightness of the beer has nothing to do with it. I mean, you're just changing the malts up. That's what you're doing there. But people have it in their mind thinking that all these dark beers are strong. Now, ideally, we're used to seeing imperial stouts now and these big type of things. But we've got like the triple, or some people say like a quad IPA. And we got other things out there that aren't as dark. So it's kind of like this whole fallacy is always kind of funny. So it's kind of like, do you still see like people that kind of just think like when you do like workshops or you're doing stuff with breweries or home brew, like do you ever come across that as far as just like, does that impact like the malt you kind of sell or anything like that, or like people?
Yeah, I think even with brewers, there's a lot of misconceptions about certain malts that are out there. Crystal malts have almost been a little bit of a dirty word here for a while, because as IPAs in the United States got lighter in color, that really important crystal malt that you're going to see in all of the British traditional IPAs was there to support the backbone and the body for those hops in those beers. That kind of got removed, and it became almost a dirty word to use those crystal malts. And I've even heard people say that, oh, well, like the crystal malts cause off flavors when they're paired with hops, which just isn't true. When you start to look at a beer as something that is supposed to be balanced, which is
Right.
the purpose of all culinary prospects, is we're looking for balance. We might tip the hat this way or that way, but we're looking for a approachable, drinkable, enjoyable experience, and balance is the name of the game. And when we say, okay, I want to make a hop forward beer and I want to support all of the New Zealand hops that are going to be showcased in this, well, this is a Pilsner, but there's not just Pilsner malt in this.
Right.
We also used some kilned malts to add some body to that. We've got some malts that are going to add sweetness to help balance out the bitterness from those hops. And so we have these misconceptions about what should and shouldn't be used coming out of kind of this IPA culture, when really all of the full spectrum of malts are different tools that you have to deal with different situations. I think of them as different colors on your palette. You would never just say, oh, well, I only want to use 3 colors. You want to have the full gauntlet to approach, and create the beer that you want to make.
Right. And to that point there, I mean, again, when people think about the beer and say more like the IPA, they're thinking about the hop. Well, the same way you choose the type of hops you want to have, you got to think about that type of malt too. And I think sometimes people overlook that the malt is just as important there as well, to make the right selection versus just like you do with the hops. You got to get that right feel for what you're looking for.
Yeah. Well, if you write recipes like I write recipes, the hops are the last thing you write in.
I don't know, man. Hey, what's up, Paul? He's got a lot of knowledge. He might be beer Jesus or malt Jesus. I don't know. He's got a good beard. So there we go. And that's my buddy Paul from now it's mainly Stupid Outdoors. He used to be PA Brew News and PA Outdoor. But Paul, he actually homebrews. He grows his own hops. He does a lot of stuff in the beer as well. So a lot of good information there. I'm sure he's enjoying too. What style of beer do you think really showcases like craft malt, like as a maltster? Like, what do you think that really you're happy to put out there to really showcase the malts you're putting out from like Blue Ox?
So I've always said if I can only have one beer from a brewery, let me have their Pilsner. Because I'm going to be able to tell, do they have good habits? Do they have good equipment? What are their practices? Pilsners, there's nothing to hide behind. So it is just, who are you as a brewer? What is your brewery doing? So I feel that way about our malt as well, because there's nothing to hide behind when you've got a Pilsner. You can't correct anything with the roaster. It is just, kind of the purest form of here is just a malt. How good can it taste? How can it perform? Our Yankee Pilsner is the Pilsner that we offer, and it is the lightest Pilsner that you can get on the market. We get a lot of new customers that kind of go on personal journeys to find the lightest colored malt they can and say, hey, this seems to be the lightest thing we can find.
Right.
And that malt is just beautiful. It really shines. It's pale malt is our number one seller right now, but I predict within the next year or so that our Pilsner might surpass the pale in usage. Everybody that has trialed our Pilsner against anybody else's Pilsner has favored ours. It won a gold medal in the Malt Cup this year, and it's just a beautiful malt. And I would say that's of any malt house. Try their Pilsner and learn what their process is. What does their grain taste like? What does their equipment taste like? There's nothing to hide behind when you have the Pilsner.
Okay. And going back a couple things, just thinking here, we kind of talked about a little bit with the territory stuff, but as far as anything that you're seeing there, like any of the rising costs, grain, energy, labor, I mean, are you seeing anything outside of that? Obviously, you mentioned you guys being more of a premium type maltster, but are you seeing other things that are now impacting your pricing and availability, or maybe the competitors like you're seeing in this marketplace we're in?
Yeah, so we'd mentioned before that the industry is in a sore spot right now, and so you're seeing everybody kind of all of the different business philosophies come to play with how people are dealing with that. In the malt world, it's a race to the bottom right now. So malt is in this situation where barley is a global commodity. Now, two-row malting quality barley is globally grown almost exclusively for the United States craft beer market, which would make it a specialty crop. But it's tied in with global commodities with food grade and feed grade. So that's bringing the cost down on it quite a bit, the value down on the barley quite a bit just for that. Now, the United States is also not the top producer of barley in the world. It's quite a bit down the list. Canada number 4, Russia or the EU is number 1, depending on if you look at the EU as one entity or broken up into different countries. But a lot of these places have really deeply subsidized the costs of barley within their countries. So it's cheaper to get the barley to the malt houses in those places, and they can really outcompete the United States grown barley. On top of that, most of these big malt houses are owned by big international food conglomerates. And, those guys have sugar money behind them. So they can take a loss on barley on malt and gain market share. And that's what we're really seeing right now is the big international malt houses are at a race to the bottom for the lowest cost to try to steal all of the market share over. And essentially what's happening is the industry is getting Walmarted, where the big guys are coming in, they're trying to drive out the little guys. The little guys might not be their target, but if the United States and Russia gets into a nuclear war, they're not the only countries that feel fallout. So you're seeing big European-based companies that are buying out Canadian companies, other companies in Europe, and are just coming in very, very aggressive with low pricing. And they're driving the prices down across the board. Everybody has to drop their prices to try to compete and stay viable in this. Now, who's really hurting is the farmer. When you work this all the way back, the way I say it, this kind of sums it up, but this is true for the money as well. The consumer expects beer to be consistent and cheap, and they put that on the brewer.
Right.
The brewer puts it on the maltster. The maltster puts it on the farmer, and the farmer gets religious.
Yeah.
So what's happening is here in Maine, we're down from about 30,000 acres of malting quality barley that's being grown down to about 6,000 acres.
Oh,
so
wow. Yeah.
It is, on top of that, barley farmers have taken a loss more years than not. I do a presentation where I show the 10 most profitable years of the craft beer industry, and barley farmers in the United States took losses on 8 of those years.
Yeah.
So they're not being incentivized to grow these crops, so they're not growing these crops anymore. And what's going to happen is if you don't have local suppliers growing barley, or local farmers growing barley, and you don't have local suppliers malting, we're going to be on a race back to the 1970s where everybody's got one supplier, all of the beer is the same, it's of low quality.
Oh, nobody wants that.
And ultimately, those guys could jack the prices right back up. So we really need people to start investing in their local infrastructure and their local ingredients, because there's a lot more at risk. If you want beer and you want to continue to have beer, you need to be able to invest in these things. And it's important for casual drinkers to ask their favorite local brewery, hey, where do you get your malt from? Do you use any local ingredients? How are you supporting the local infrastructure? I personally don't want to see the wide range and diversity of beers we have right now go away.
Oh, no, I would definitely not want that. That's the whole shrink the Snickers bar and charge more for it type mentality.
Exactly.
But yeah, you mentioned about the producer. I didn't even realize as much until with the Russia-Ukraine war that was taking place, how big Ukraine was as a grain producer and exporter for what they were sending out. That was a huge, with them going under stuff, that was a huge hit for the beer industry, especially overseas that were relying on the Ukraine for some of that stuff there. And you look at here in the States, because one of the things that came up when some of the tariff type stuff was, oh, we'll just grow it here. Like, well, you can't just grow like the grain here. You can't just grow like, the thing that we can grow here the most of is probably the hops out, for some of the land. But when it comes to grain and others like grain and yeast, we don't have the best areas to grow a lot of that stuff, right? So you have to rely on.
That's correct. Yeah, the United States isn't necessarily the best climate to be growing barley in.
Mm-hmm.
Furthermore, a farmer can't just say, hey, I want to switch over and grow pumpkins now because that's what's, making the most amount of money. To retool a farm is just as hard as, retooling Ford to start making airplanes during World War II. It's a massive undertaking. You basically have to build a whole new factory. And the farming equipment is stupidly expensive. Harvesters are $1.5 million. So you're not just deciding all of a sudden that you're switching this over. And when you buy a harvester, it's only going to do maybe 1 or 2 different crops. It's not like I bought this harvester and now it can do onions or potatoes or barley. That harvester does that one thing. So it's not as simple as just, hey, let's grow this in the United States now.
No, that's definitely something to think about there. I mean, unless you got money in John Deere, I guess you could make money off that harvester, but everything else is getting screwed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, with the things happening, are you seeing more breweries now as your clients being more selective or maybe experimental with ingredients? Like if they're getting squeezed, are they trying to, maybe can we do something like this differently? If that's going to maybe hit our bottom line a little bit better, or kind of still trying to go traditionally what they've been doing? Do you see any mixing up taking place?
We're really fortunate that we got amazing customers.
Mm-hmm.
And because we are a premium product, most of our customers do value quality at a higher level, and are generally adhering to these best practices we've been talking about more than people aren't. So I'm finding that our particular customers aren't hurting as bad as the overall industry trends are showing,
That's good.
and we've actually been able to grow with our customers. We actually grew last year with our. We knew we were going to grow a bunch because we were coming off of the expansion and we had a whole new capacity and could reach out further. But we even grew with our existing customers last year too, which felt like a huge win for us when
Mm-hmm.
most suppliers were feeling flatline as being a positive thing.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I thought, was your glass empty? Did you want to get another beer or?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm
Yeah.
going
Oh
to
no.
snag
Hey,
another one.
I never mind anybody getting another beer. And again, those of you watching, feel free to drop a comment in there if there's any questions you have or things you want to find out from the malt side. Go ahead and put them out there so we can have you as a part of the conversation here as well.
I'm on
And
to the Allagash Lager now.
okay, all right. So that, do you know if that's being distributed like kind of nationwide or through their regular distribution channels, or is it just up in the Northeast? Because I have not seen that one yet.
I am not sure how far this one gets out. This is the one that got the GABF gold medal this year. So I would
Okay.
assume that they're trying to get it out to their fans, but I'm not entirely sure how far this one's getting distributed.
Okay. I'll have to definitely keep an eye out for that one there as well to try to pick up there. Um, do you see more of the, we talked about, a great thing to highlight the malts being like the Pilsner. Are you seeing more brewers now? Because here in Cincinnati, we are getting a push where we're seeing more lagers coming out, but are you seeing more traditional styles starting to come out more? Or is it kind of still trying to push boundaries with some of their ingredients? I mean, what do you kind
So
of.
yeah, one of my favorite things that I think I saw happen last year, and I'm going to preface this with I'm a very German-focused drinker and brewer. I like to make German beers. German styles are my favorite to drink. But I noticed last year people started making milds, bitters, and browns that were really good.
Oh,
And
oh,
it was all of
nice.
these English styles that I haven't seen made in a while. And the local breweries that were making these were killing it. They were all really good. They were all low ABV, interesting malt profiles going into them, just really drinkable, sessionable beers. And I feel like I hadn't seen that a lot of those styles really enforce since I entered the industry. It had
Okay.
been a while.
Yeah, it's rare to see some of the miles out there. I do see a couple more of the brown ales popping up in spots. Actually, one of the breweries here, Third Eye Blind, I just picked up their walnut brown ale. Um, and I love seeing when breweries are putting that stuff out there. When I was in Baltimore, we were out there for 3 years before coming back here about a year ago. One of the breweries there, Guilford Institute, or Guilford Brewery, I should say. I don't know why I said Institute, but
They should be an
they were all,
institute.
they should be. They were all European brewed styles, right? So you didn't even get an American IPA when you walked to the brewery. They had an English IPA, but then there was like a Belgian, it was like a stout, it was a porter, and they pretty much had everything coming if you were in a European type brewery, which was great because it made them stand out that much more. Now they ended up buying Flying Fish out of New Jersey when Flying Fish had to close. So now you get some of that stuff in there that's canned and everything like that. But as far as what they're putting on taps, it's usually like the and it was just a refreshing thing just to see like a European style beer thing and being able to get some of the good stuff they were doing.
I think especially during the IPA craze, it was really kind of blowing my mind because you'd get all of these craft brewers saying, "Hey, I became a brewer and I wanted to start a brewery because I was tired of just having macro lager. Everything was the same and I wanted something different." And then we had
Mm-hmm.
everyone making, Citrus Simcoe IPAs. It felt very ubiquitous, and it was like, okay, what are we doing? And then we started what I would call Americanizing all of these European styles, where it's like, oh, it's this style, but with a bunch of Cascade in it, or whatnot. And that's that's an A+ for create. Well, I'm going to say that's maybe like a B. That's a solid B for creativity. All right. We can get better than that. But there's really something to be said for having two style beers. And I think where it gets interesting, and what's interesting for me is making those beers with your local ingredients and still keeping style, not pushing it, into different style, but saying, hey, I use the things I've got and I was able to, make this beer that, stands up with the beer from the place that it comes from. And that's something that, more than anywhere else in the world, Americans have access to the widest range and the best quality ingredients in the whole beer world. The fact that we would bring in ingredients from any other part of the world is really kind of mind-blowing. When you travel to Europe and meet European brewers, they think Americans are crazy because, if you're in Germany, the Germans only use German malt and German hops, and the Brits only use British malt and British hops. They're like, I would never think to bring in a German hop. Are you kidding me? Like, why would I do that? It's really only in the United States where we've got this inferiority complex that like, oh, well, like the local stuff's okay, but like I need to get the German stuff if I'm making a German beer. It's like, sure, yeah, I mean, I can say there's a level of authenticity there, but it's not authentic for that malt to travel on a boat for a month to get here, cooking in a shipping container. If you ask the Germans what they would use, it would be a local ingredient. Look at all the macro breweries when Augustus Busch and those guys came over. They didn't import European ingredients. They used the local ingredients. That's how culture is made. You've got a community that has a need and a want, and you're using your local resources to fulfill that need and want. And that is how community and culture is built. That's how all the styles came about. That's what people get behind and are proud of.
Yeah. Well, I think of, us being Americans, we definitely have the tendency to push. It was funny you were saying that. And in my mind, I was thinking like Saturday Night Live should do a skit like the overboard American brewer and just have him walking around and somebody's like brewing a beer from another country. It's like, what that needs? What? More ABV. Start throwing shit in there.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the dial that only goes to 11,
Right.
Like, I got an idea. Let's turn this to 11.
I'm walking around with the stars and the stripes because I'm American. That's why. And that's how we brew beer, right?
Yeah.
I might try to sell that idea to Saturday Night Live, but we'll see. And shout out to you, Vanessa. Thank you for joining. Vanessa's one of the longtime viewers and friends of the channel. So great to have you. She's a big Dragon's Milk fan. She loves Dragon's Milk. That's like one of her favorites. And then I got her turned on the Left Hand Brewing as well to take a look at there. But what are like some of the other malt or grain trends you're seeing right now across brewing? Like anything that's kind of standing out that you're kind of like tracking or watching and seeing where it may go? And then we didn't talk about the NA yet, but there, we have the NA stuff that's happening.
Yeah. So in the malt world, I'm seeing there's a lot of interesting malts that are out there on the market. A lot of people are changing what they offer. I've seen some classic British malts aren't going to be offered anymore, but I'm seeing local suppliers starting to pick those up. We were really happy to bring our roaster online last year because that kind of filled the hole of those roasted malts and those crystal malts that people really needed to buy from a macro supplier. We had a lot of our customers, particularly the little guys, say that bag of roast was the only thing that was keeping them from being 100% local. So having those available is great, that people are able to turn away from the Europeans that are stopping making some of these malts that people rely on for some of their flagships. The crop year this year was phenomenal as well. Every farm that I've talked to, 26 is going to be a really good year for beer. The barley crop was dream specs coming from the farms. So I think that we're just going to see a really good quality of beer this year from just better ingredients and brewers focusing in on those best practices. I think 26 is going to be a really good year for the quality of beer.
Do you think the crops were maybe impacted by just, I guess, some of the weather patterns? We saw a lot of areas getting a lot of wet rain and snow and all kinds of stuff over the last year. Maybe we know some areas have been struggling with drought and stuff too. So maybe we were able to bounce back because the weather was actually working with us over the last year.
So yeah, 23 and 24 were some of, up here in the Northeast, were some of the roughest harvests that we've had in recent history. So there's a part of, hey, we were owed one
Yeah.
that we think came into play. But the conditions were exactly what you want. We had a really wet spring and early summer, and then a really dry end of summer going into fall, which is exactly what you want for a barley harvest. One of the worst things that can happen to a harvest is a wet fall. Because what can happen is that the barley can actually start to germinate while it's still on the plant. Barley doesn't care about malt or beer. It cares about barley and making more barley. So genetically, inherently, it wants to start germinating as soon as it can. So if it can start germinating on the plant and start growing the second it hits, that's an evolutionary advantage for it. So germination can only happen once in a plant. So if that is already started, then that barley is useless to us. We can't make malt out of it. So those, wet into youth stages and then really dry at harvest is exactly what you want for a high quality crop.
Okay. Put that on a t-shirt. Barley don't care. Let me germinate.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So as I kind of just tipped on there a little bit ago, and we touched on it a little bit before we came on, but non-beer segments, you guys got a little bit of distilleries you're doing some business with. You got the NA type things. How much are they starting to play a little bit more of the role in the business you're doing, or you feel like there's a great opportunity in that area? Like, what is kind of happening there for you?
So the NA is a real market, and I think that Americans kind of scoffed at it for a long time and overlooked it. For many years, maybe even a decade now, the non-alcoholic sector has been the largest growth sector in the German beer market. And many of the European markets were showing massive growth in the non-alcoholic way before Americans were taking it serious. I think that, Athletic really started to make a lot of craft brewers turn their heads when they looked at the growth of those guys, where they just kept exploding and exploding and exploding. But the trends of beer for at least the past 200, maybe 300 years, probably longer than that, has been for a lighter color, lower ABV, balanced, easy drinking beer. And that's why Pilsner took over the world when it did. At that point in time, it was low ABV, it was light. It was, we got to remember that, particularly in European history, alcohol was the only thing you could drink. You brushed your teeth with beer because the water wasn't safe. And if you're given,
which is always funny because the beer was 90% water, but
exactly. But if you're feeding it to the kids and you're drinking it at work all day and you're out in the fields, you don't want to be getting hammered the whole time. So that balanced, low ABV, easy drinking thing was just naturally what the consumers were looking for. When we look at the macro guys, we often tell the lie that they're using the corn and the rice in those beers to make them cheaper. Corn and rice are not cheap. It is expensive to use those ingredients in those. They used them because when they were free of the Reinheitsgebot, once they came to the United States, they could use ingredients like that, which made a lighter colored beer, which is what the public was looking for. So to get back to the point you're trying to make, non-alcoholics make a lot of sense. That fits into kind of the end point where a lot of that trend is going towards. And I would say even in my own friendship group, brewers and non-brewers, it's split about 50-50 of people that either currently aren't drinking, or whether that be on a temporary or a permanent base. A lot of people are practicing temperance at a level that we haven't before. I never want to cut anything out because I love my life. But moderation is a good thing.
I agree. That's what I always say to people as well. Usually, like, we're doing this on a Tuesday. Usually I'll drink between a Thursday through the Sunday, maybe, depending. But over that time, I might have one or two on a Friday and nothing else on a Saturday or so. It just all depends, right? I try to moderate. And like I said, neither of us are doing dry January, as everybody can see here, because we are drinking beer. So, but I feel like if you're doing enough balance in between, there's no, for me, in my opinion, not a need to take a whole month off because you're already moderating and not getting after this stuff. But the NA does open up that opportunity for people to actually enjoy some stuff. One of the things I also do, I'm a Go ambassador. So I share a lot of stuff that Go Brewing is doing. They've been an opportunity for some people to get into stuff and enjoy some of the NA things there. And it's really surprising, the NA market now compared to, I was going back when I don't know how old you are, and about when I went back and I think of the NAs back in the 80s, and it was like Sharps or O'Doul's, and it's like, why did you just pour sand water in my mouth or something like that? I mean, it was just terrible, right? So, but now, yeah, some really good stuff out there. It's kind of like, I told people, like, I had that Deschutes, everybody knows the Black Butte, and I had the NA version, and I was like, I need to do a side-by-side because this is really pretty tasty to be an NA beer they actually put out. I heard the L Smith has a nice NA they put out for the Speedway style. So you're seeing brewers being able to kind of go this different direction, and you wouldn't break it up. Like I told somebody, asked me one time, like, why would I want to drink NA? It's like, you're at lunch, you're having a burger, you kind of want to have a beer with it, but you can't. Grab an NA, get that same type of appeal with it possibly. So it's interesting to see. But you're also doing it with the distilleries. So you have distillery stuff happening, but you also have a couple THC stuff too, right? Like coming on board. So what are you all seeing, like, between the distilleries and the THC thing is now a question mark around it for what's going to happen over the next year. But yeah.
Yeah, the THC isn't something that we really factor into our sales plan or our goals for the year. Some of our customers do contract make non-alcoholics, and then some of those do get turned into THC beverages. I wish I could tell you what those brands were to pump them, but I don't know because they're just kind of co-packaging those things for a lot of these people. That's a whole interesting world. I've got a lot of opinions about it that I'm really conflicted about that, but I don't see that moving our needle professionally too much one way or the other. The distillery world is an interesting one. Whiskey is doing fairly good, especially with the new category of American single malt, which the TTB finally settled on earlier this year after years of closing the comment period. And surprise, surprise, it's basically the Scottish model, but, put in United States wherever it said Scotland before. So we did see a little bit of a boom around that. One of the fun things that we do at the malt house is we've got a smoker, and we do custom smoked malts. So we have
very nice.
A lot of distilleries reach out to us and say, how down are you to play around? Which the answer is very. The weirdest thing we've done so far is a seaweed smoked malt. That was Treehouse's distillery took some of that, then there's a distillery on Long Island called Matchbook. They took some of that as well. And then we're currently, as we speak, smoking some Palo Santo wood malt for Matchbook. The whole malt house kind of smells like a hippie right now. It's an interesting one. But the with that happening, with the single malt becoming a thing for a lot of Americans, when they think of single malt, they think of those Isla style whiskeys, which are, the peat smoked. Right. So we've had a lot of interest around our smoker, particularly in the winter, where we're doing a lot of smoked projects for distilleries, getting it out there.
Excellent. Yes, the seaweed smoke. That's kind of interesting.
Apparently, when they brewed with it, it made the whole distillery smell like miso soup.
You like some miso soup?
Yeah.
You like some miso soup? You ever go to the hibachi places, and they're like, "Oh, you get soup? Like, get the miso soup? All right, yeah. Perk up a little bit, yeah." Never know what's really in the miso soup. I just know it tastes good, though. Do you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Oh, no, no. I was just going to say the whiskey world has been interesting. I keep waiting for my boss to send me down to Kentucky for a week. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
You come to Kentucky, you better let me know because I'm right there on the border. So we
Nice.
got the
Yeah, I'll
Kentucky
meet you up.
Bourbon Trail. Yeah, definitely.
That sounds great. Yeah. I'm a
Yeah,
Scotch
yeah.
guy first and foremost, but if I'm in Kentucky, when in Rome.
You know the funny thing about Scotch, and I didn't realize this until like I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago. I was watching 60 Minutes one night, and they were doing a story about the Scotch barreling and all that stuff that happens over in Scotland. They barrel in Kentucky bourbon barrels,
Yeah,
whiskey barrels.
absolutely.
I did not know that. That was kind of interesting just to see. So they get the whiskey barrels over from America and they use them for the barreling. So that
Yeah,
was kind of a cool concept.
they can only use second use barrels for aging in. And it's really popular to age Scotch for the final couple of years in port or sherry barrels. But the sherry and port market is falling through the ground right now. So when you're in Scotland at these distilleries, they tell you if you really love Scotch, go buy a bottle of sherry or a bottle of port because there's actually distillers in Portugal that are filling barrels just to basically dump the booze to sell the barrels to the Scotch industry because the market has fallen out so much for them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I was going to ask you, do you think drinkers are becoming more aware of ingredients like malt? Do you think they're kind of accounting to that now, similar to the way they do hops? Like you'll hear people that'll say, "Oh, what's your hop favorite?" They'll be like, "Oh, I'm a Cascade or I'm Galaxy or but you don't really hear hops. I mean, you don't hear really malts as much being said as the hops. But do you think people are becoming more aware, or do you think that's still something that come down the pike?
So the maltsters would love for our customer to care about malt.
Yeah.
I feel like a big part of my job is just explaining to brewers what malt is. It's a really ambiguous concept to your average consumer. It kind of you say malt and they might know that it's an ingredient for beer or whiskey. They might think of
Right.
whoppers and chocolate malt balls. I think a lot of people think of like their grandparents going to the soda shop and ordering a malt frap or something like that. It's a weird ingredient for people that most people don't have a context to. And so it's really hard for them to understand all of the different malts that go into a beer. I think it's probably more important that consumers learn their beer styles and then look into if their ingredients are being locally sourced or not. Because I think it's just way too big of a learning curve for a consumer to learn all of the different malts and be like, oh, well, I really prefer there to be a touch of Vienna in my Pilsner versus a light Munich in there, which, some brewers might not even be able to pick out those differences in those. Hops has done a really good job of marketing itself in that kind of a way.
Right.
But I just don't think that you've got the educated enough palate and experienced enough palate with your average drinker to pick out a nuanced difference like the malt bill in there. So I think that understanding that the different malts make different styles can kind of help. So if you say, oh, I'm really into brown ales, then you can kind of look for other beers that are that color and understand that similar malts are going into those. That's probably about as good as we're going to get with the consumers. And I'd much rather just have our consumers focused on getting locally sourced beers that are made from locally sourced ingredients.
Gotcha. Yeah, because one of the things I was going to ask you is about how you thought the education played out in helping brewers so they can get the most out of the malts, like the education you were providing to them about the malts you're doing. Because we do see on the end result, you'll have bottles and cans, and it'll list the hops and it'll list the malts. So if somebody's and again, it's probably more to the beer geek, but if you're looking at the bottle, you're like, hey, I've gotten this beer and it had the Vienna, and I had this beer, the Vienna, I had this beer, and I love them all. So maybe I'm a Vienna kind of person, right? And then you get someone else, well, I got the Crystal Pills, and that's what I usually, although I think, is there a point, maybe it's just a matter of time, because now people will see hops listed, now they see malts listed, and they start to build up their own little thing and kind of knowing their own characteristics, maybe.
Totally. And I kind of look at like my own drinking arc too, right? Because for a
Hmm.
long period of time, there was two kinds of beers, right? You had Budweiser and Guinness, right? And those are like the
Hmm.
different styles of beer you have. And
Right.
everybody's like, yeah, it's like a Budweiser, it's like a Guinness, right? And there's nothing else. And then as you start to get experienced and as we became more educated as a beer culture, entering the early 2000s and going on, then all of a sudden you're starting to, I can remember living in Philly, it was like I had like a golden monkey, right? And
Oh
it was like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, like what, this is a beer? Like this is completely different. That's not a Guinness nor a Budweiser,
Right.
nor a Yingling at that point in time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And so now we fast forward to 2025 and just about any beer style you can imagine you can probably find within ease. You probably have a local beer bar that brings in a variety of beers. And I tell my friends the first time I ever had a Goza, I homebrewed it because I had read about it. You couldn't find any
Yeah.
really commercially. I homebrewed a couple, was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Now I went out with a friend this weekend and was drinking Goza right off the menu. Like, oh yeah, of course they've
Yeah.
got Goza. Like, why
Yeah.
wouldn't they? So I look at that, so for that 15-year, gap of time that I've been in the industry, I've seen the consumer get educated on all of the different styles of beer that are out there, and that's becoming more comfortable. And kind of on the back end of that, have seen consumers starting to educate themselves on the hops that were in there. So I
Hmm.
think that, yeast and malt probably is in the stars, but I do think it'll probably be reserved for the nerds, the people that truly care.
Yeah. 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 The yeast thing is a little bit more than what the malts are for sure, but it was interesting. I went to CBC last year in Indy and just meeting with and talking with some of the yeast producers. So I feel like they're the ones left out in the cold right now trying to get in the door still. Like you got
Yeah.
the hops are in, they're on the couch or whatever. Malts are kind of in that hallway, but then outside is still yeast trying to get in. So over time, maybe it will actually happen. And it's the education. It's always like who educates who to drive the best success in the industry, right? And again, if you're a beer geek, you're looking into a little bit more than your average type consumer, which I've been in many a time a store. The average consumer is just eyes glazed over on what they're looking for. And I ended up helping to pick out something. They're like, oh, thank you very much, because I had no idea what to get here. They go out the store with the beer and they're happy for it. But what advice would you give to like small or new breweries when it comes to ingredient sourcing? Like, is there anything where when you have the breweries come in, you talk about the malts, obviously we talked about that, but do you give them any types of tips of advice or how to do the ingredient sourcing and kind of have as much as it ties? We talked about having that local tie and all that stuff.
So, obviously when I go into a brewery, they know that I represent a malt house and I've got an incentive to sell them my malt. So I
Hmm.
tend to not just come in and be like, hey, this is what you need to do and this is what you should do. But I really just try to build a reputation with them first and foremost. I've been a
Yeah.
brewer for a lot longer than I was a maltster. I like to see what they're doing, how they're doing it. Everybody's got their own philosophies, kind of
Hmm.
see where they're at on their journey. And as they know who we are and who I am and making myself available, I will find that a lot of customers will reach out to me for input when they're writing recipes or have questions about different products. And that's kind of how I approach, that's like my sales pitch, if you will. I just want to be a trustworthy, non-pushy, reliable person. And then uh, through that trust, people realize that, okay, we've got something going on here with that.
Yeah.
For anybody that's new and getting into this, I'm going to say learn everything that you can. Learn
Hmm.
how to read a spec sheet so you know exactly what your ingredients are, and learn, what the implications of this spec versus that spec and how it affects what you're doing. Anybody can make alcohol. It is really easy to make alcohol. You can mess around and make something that's drinkable and even good, but intentionally making what you intended to make is where the good stuff comes in. That's where the great brewers live. and
Right.
learning everything about your ingredients in your process and how to manipulate those to make exactly what you're trying to make is really what the point is as a creator, whether you're making beer or cooking or
Yeah.
painting, whatever it is. It's doing what you intend to do with that. So just learn everything.
Yeah. I mean, to testify that, I mean, the times when I did homebrew years ago, when I first started really getting more into beer, I wanted to kind of do that home brewing type angle and kind of pick that part up. There is something to that. It was just, and it's like, it's almost like playing golf. It challenges you, right? Because you got to do all this right stuff. It's the whole thing about the sanitary type thing. You got to make sure everything is perfect and it keeps you focused, stuff on it. And then you got to just be patient. That was the worst thing for me, was the patience. Like, I got to let it sit here for how long? Oh my God, what do you do for the next 2 weeks or whatever? Like, you go buy other beer. Wait, but I want this beer. But then when you get that end result, and then when I had done it, I had a sampling of people that I worked with that really enjoyed it. They still ask me to today if I'm going to make any more beers or whatever, because they really enjoyed the different beers. It's a cool thing. When you get into it, it was just like the experience of it all. It was just awesome in itself. And, for me, when I was going into like the home brew type things and looking at the different ones and sniffing the hops, looking at the grains, sniffing the grain, figuring out which grain to kind of do. There's a lot of stuff that's out there. So with you guys doing like a lot of the education on that part, I know it definitely helps out brewers, because just like the customer gets lost at the buying a beer, I can see brewers getting lost on choosing what kind of grain to actually pick up.
They should. And something, a big mistake I see a lot of new breweries make is that, or new brewers make, is that they're afraid to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
We like to brag as an industry how friendly and community focused this beer industry
Mm-hmm.
is. And it truly is.
Yes.
I have learned over and over again that the breweries aren't here to compete with each other, but to help bring everybody up.
Right. Right.
The very first brewery I worked at was a little brewery that was across the street from Allagash at the point in time. And we had a day where our pump broke down in the middle of a brew day. Now, in other industries, the competitor across the street goes, "Hey, we're running a flash sale. You're down?" Allagash sent over one of their brewers and engineers to help us
Yeah.
get our pump back online and see us through the rest of the brew day.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me, that is the way the industry is. I have been astounded at how open of a book some of the who's who in this industry will be with, "Oh yeah, this is my award-winning recipe," or "Hey, have you tried this?" or "I've run into that problem." Everybody is here to help you. And
Yeah.
do not be afraid to pick up the phone and call your neighbor and ask a question. We are all here to help each other out.
Yeah. I mean, it's astounding when you see it in action, because being at a few of the conferences and talking with folks, I mean, I pretty much worked my way into it as far as doing what I'm doing here and being able to tell and share the stories, and not actually being a brewer or a maltster or having it. But I was able, in the acceptance coming in, and people like loving to come on and share the stories of what they're actually doing and appreciating what I mean, it was just like a great community. It was just like, definitely, it's all high tide raises all boat type community. Everybody's kind of like, we're all in this together, and anybody can do any type of aspect to help out the industry. It's like welcome and just appreciate it, which is awesome. Because if you ever watch the history of food or whatever on the History Channel, like some of the food wars, you just see like them people get cutthroat on stuff. And you don't see that in the beer industry. Everybody's just like kind of helping out when they can.
Yeah, and it's been a part of the history too. You look at like the Cologne Convention in Cologne, Germany, where all of the brewers in Cologne decide, "Hey, we're going to not compete with each other, but we're going to compete with the rest of the world. And we're all
Mm-hmm.
going to make Kolsch, and we're all going to make it to these standards, and we're going to help each other out, because it's Cologne versus the world, not Cologne versus Cologne."
Right.
And it's a tradition that has been there for a very long time and still continues to be there. And that's one of our biggest resources. This isn't just one of the oldest industries, it's one of the oldest literate industries. There
Yeah.
is nothing new in the beer world. I always joke that a dictator takes over your country and the whole world declares war on you. We know what that does
Mm-hmm.
to a beer market. Vikings invade your shores, we know what that does to a beer market. There is nothing new that you are going to do or experience that isn't well written down or your neighbor hasn't experienced. So,
Right.
learn everything you can, share with your neighbors, learn from your neighbors, and we all bring this up together.
And Ryan, you are correct. Great beer does benefit everyone for sure. But how do you see like the role of like the regional maltsters evolving over the next 5 years? Like, what do you see like down the road? Like, do you see opportunity? Do you see batten down the hatches, tighten things up a little bit more, but you're still going to be okay? Just get through the storm. Like, anything that you kind of see out there on the horizon that throws anything up in your mind?
The small regional maltster has to succeed. They've got the cards stacked up against them. We don't have the support of our, we don't have the government support in the ways that a place like Canada does,
Right.
Supplementing the infrastructure and subsidizing the crops and the transportation and things like that. Much in the way that it's Colton versus the world, it can be the United States versus the world. We don't have to be isolationists about it, but it can be us using what we have, paying attention to our customers first, which is the way culture and community is built and always has been built. We've got customers that have needs, they have wants. We have local ingredients. We're really fortunate that we live in a country that has all of the beer ingredients local to us, particularly here in the northeast of the United States. We've got all of the ingredients local.
Yeah, you're in a perfect spot. Yeah, definitely.
And so using what we have to supply our people is really, like I said, that's how culture is developed. And it's also how good economy happens. Here in Maine, in the Northeast, we talk about if the barley's grown here, malted here, brewed here, drank here, then the money stays here. And that benefits our communities. Yeah. It's why we started the malt house in the first place. We wanted to make these rural agricultural communities more economically sustainable. It's why we chose floor malt over pneumatic malting, because we have to hire more people and create more jobs to do it. We could do it more efficiently, but this benefits our community. And our customers really see that and value that as well. And that's why they put our logo on their can, and they like to say that they partner with us. And they put up plaques that say how many acres of local malt they've used. It's the story that people want to know.
Nice.
And it's the story that people want to be a part of.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. One thing I don't see really with malt, and you'll see it with beer, obviously, but occasionally you'll see it with hops. Do you get like any of the AB and Bevs or big boys trying to get into purchasing or trying to get into the malt market, or they kind of stay over where they're at? Because I know like they've done stuff going after hop farms before, but I've never seen them do anything on malts at all.
No, I've had them reach out to me looking for malt for special projects, which is always kind of a like, hey, so I got an email from so-and-so, and it's like, oh, really? Like, what did they want? And they're not really coming after us. They are customers that can buy and own their own farms and their own supply chains, and they do. Right. And so they kind of work in their own world, and we kind of work in our own world. And particularly, I guess in the barley world too, but much in the way that, like military or racing or, some of these high technology, like NASA things, develop new technologies that eventually work their way down to the consumer level. What the big guys are doing with their fields, whether it be hops or barley, some of that technology and knowledge trickles down, and we all get to benefit from that. So I'm not really worried about those guys coming in and taking over us in the way that a regional brewery might worry about those guys.
Gotcha.
I'm more worried about the international suppliers.
Okay.
Interesting. They're the Walmarts in our world that are trying to kill the local suppliers.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So they're trying to come over, and I'm kind of thinking you're probably getting a big push out of like China and then some of the Europe type stuff. But China's a huge one, kind of doing a lot of the grain stuff too, right?
Well, yes, but China's interesting because China keeps everything in China as far as the beer world goes.
Okay,
For
okay.
ingredients. So there is cultivars of hops and barley that are grown in China that we don't even know about over here as Westerners because they all go
Okay.
into snow lager or Qingdao, and
Yeah.
that's it. They keep it internal. China's way more interested in selling us brewing equipment.
I even get the emails on the brewing equipment. Like I'm not a brewer. I'm like a podcaster. I do things like I get these emails. Hey, we can sell you this amount of size barrel. Like I'm not in that part of the industry. I don't know why you're contacting me, but yeah, they see anything with beer, they fire you out in direct mail email. So yeah,
Yeah. I probably get an email every day asking if I want to buy a centrifuge, you know?
right. Well, what excites you most about the future of Blue Ox and the beer industry as a whole right now?
Um, for the beer industry, I'm really excited that it seems like people are making beer that tastes like beer again and narrowing down on those best practices. I'm just happy for sensibly well-made beers. And that's what
Yeah,
I'm starting to see this year. And I think 26 is going to be a great year for people using quality ingredients and making just really good, sensible beers. Not looking for that, like, wow, I put Fruity Loops in this beer and isn't that novel? Come check it out. But just saying, you know, you had a hard day at work and you got home. This is the beer you want to drink,
right.
which
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of value in that. And there's always been a lot of value in that. So that's what I'm really excited for in the beer world. For Blue Ox, I'm excited to keep on growing and reaching out further and further. This past year, we made a big move to really own our own backyard and bring the rest of New England into the fold. And I'm excited to just keep learning and experiencing these new breweries as we bring on new customers and seeing what they get to do with the products.
Gotcha. Okay. And we got a question from Ryan, who is one half of Cincy Brew Dads here in Cincinnati, where I'm at. So they've got their channel. If you haven't followed Cincy Brew Dads, check them out. But question for Ian:
Okay.
top 3 beer styles.
All right. So I always say that Hefeweiss was the beer that made me want to become a professional. Kolsch is the beer style that I would stake my career on. And I probably end up drinking Pilsner the most.
Wow. There you go. That's kind of an interesting mix just because what you see nowadays, like you mentioned, you like getting traditional type stuff, and it's like somebody throws an IPA out there or somebody throws a stout out there. But I like how you stayed away from it. For me, I've been a bigger fan over the last year and a half of Roush beers. I've been loving the smokiness coming out. So that's become one of my favorite styles to go to. And sometimes I just wonder if people are kind of brainwashed into thinking about IPA because that's all that's put in front of them. When they
Mm-hmm.
get opened up to other stuff, they're like, oh, this is different. I like this. This is different. But breweries are also afraid to maybe put other stuff out because if they don't sell it all, they're like they get left holding the bag and they lose money on it. I think it becomes a business decision. But I just think there's so much opportunity for other styles. And talking about Ryan, last Friday, we actually went to one of the breweries here, Nine Giants Fermentorium, where they do like small batch and experimental brewing. And I prefer that to the actual brewery because they're doing other stuff that's not being done by everybody else, which is a cool thing.
Yeah, and I think that this goes back to that having an identity and sticking to it
Mm-hmm.
concept. I saw way too many breweries over the past decade say, oh, well, you have to do the IPA if you're going to stay in business. You have to do an IPA. And I get that. I definitely see the numbers. I understand how those economics work. I keep bringing up Allagash as an example, but I joke that if Rob Todd was your current Brewery Day owner, Allagash would have the best light lager in New England.
Yeah.
Because when he was going around trying to get people to buy a Vit beer, when nobody had heard of a Vit beer and light lager was king, he could have very easily said, well, you got to have a light lager if you're going to make a brewery, be successful. And he wouldn't have been wrong in saying that, but he had an identity, he had a goal, he stuck to it. And
Yeah.
it shows, that brewery has an identity now, and they get respect from the Belgians for making Belgian beer. And so, yeah, IPAs are ubiquitous, but I think that there's a lot of space for people to have a unique identity, stand behind it, and do something really well that isn't what everybody else is doing, and to find their voice in their community. I do believe that anybody can do that if you have a true, authentic identity that you stick to.
Yeah. And I got to say, I'm going to give you some applause there because you said Vit beer. And it's like, I love when people pronounce the beer stuff the way it's supposed to be. Not wit beer, Vit beer. It's like, I get to be a purist sometimes on that. So it's kind of, when I see people say Mars, it's kind of one of those beer geek type things. When they say Mars instead of Mercer, it's like, it's not really the way you want to pronounce, but that's just me. But I had to give you applause on that there.
All good. Well, my dad's family's of German background, and I speak a little German, so I like to bite into my W's a little bit.
There you go. Well, that is awesome that you actually did that there. And Ryan said definitely 3 strong styles. So yeah. If a brewer had never worked for Blue Ox, before we wrap up here, what would you want them to know first? What was like the one thing you would tell them first they should know about Blue Ox?
If a brewer is going to use our malt for the first time, what would I tell them?
Right. Yeah, they never worked with your stuff before.
I would tell them that it's really high quality malt. Make sure that you check your mill gap when you're using it for the first time, because it's going to mill different from every supplier and every grain. You should be checking your mill gap all the time, but a lot of people are surprised by how efficient our malt is, and usually overshoot their numbers the first time they brew with us. So look at that spec sheet, check your mill gap, and just be aware that we've got really efficient malt that's what most of our customers report back.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think we've been on here about 1:40. We'll go ahead and get wrapped up so that I don't take all your evening. But anything you want to add into this, if anything we didn't talk about or cover, and you've been awesome as a guest on here, so we got to get you back on at another point as well and do some stuff.
I appreciate it. Most people want me to shut up about this stuff, so I'll always take a captive audience. And for argument, I have moved on to a non-alcoholic for my third one. This is a all Blue Ox non-alcoholic Pilsner style from Baxter. That's drinking real nice.
Okay, excellent. What kind of you said Pilsner, right? For the
style?
It's
a Pilsner style. Yep.
All right. Excellent.
I kept it lagers tonight to stay on brand.
Well, no, a lot of good stuff happening at Blue Ox. For those of you that may get in a little bit later, at the top of the comments, it is pinned where you can actually check out their website here. And if you are a home brewer, definitely encourage that, as they do have some things out there for you as well. And for those you listening back on the podcast, we appreciate that there too. And join us for one of the live sessions if you can. But I think we're going to get wrapped up here. If you want to hang out for a second, I'll catch up with you a little bit afterwards. I'm going to wrap this one up and then do the sign off.
Sounds good. Yeah, I appreciate everybody coming out and listening. And please reach out, Ian at blueoxmalthouse.com. If anybody has any questions, follow-ups, we're here for you guys. We're here for the brewers. We're mostly brewers working at Blue Ox. So we like to joke about how we're brewers making malt for brewers. And we're here for the brewers. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And we love hearing from you.
Yeah, definitely. Drop a comment. If you're back on the replay, you want to get a hold of Ian there as well, just drop a comment and get you set up. But that being said, Ian, I'll put you back in the green room for a second. I'll wrap up here and then we can talk a little bit after.
All right. Awesome.
Cool. All right, guys. So before I wrap up here, just to give you a little bit of an update just on some stuff. This Thursday night, we are back with the Thursday night live stream. It's been a long time, but a lot of you had asked before about doing it on Thursday nights. So I am coming back. Todd will be here. We're going to start the Thirsty Thursday live stream, something new. Try to get Shannon on and a few other folks as well. So make sure to tune in for that. Next Tuesday night, I am going to have Julie Rose on from Kick Fizz. We're going to be talking about her THC company and the THC drinks. I'll have an unboxing taking place a little bit later this week on what they actually sent out before we head into that show. So stay tuned for that. We'll still have the Midwest Beer News to follow on Saturday and a few other things happening. So just want to make sure I keep you guys in the loop to stay tuned. But big shout out and thanks again to Ian for coming on tonight from Blue Ox. And I will look forward to catching up with you guys in a couple nights here. Oh, it's going to be a drinking week for sure. Cheers, everybody, and talk to you then.